Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're gonna start with some just a little housekeeping and introductions while folks file in. I'm Jack Tebow. I'm a principal of growth and partnerships here at Azure Homes. Um, and we are a modular housing manufacturer that 3D prints houses in a factory. Among the many products we do tiny homes on wheels, like the one you see behind me. So we are here at our Denver factory in Northeast Denver, joined by Gene Eidelman, Azure Printed Homes' CEO, and Ruben Martinez from the American Glamping Association. Again, just some housekeeping. This will be a fireside chat style format, so I'll be asking Gene and Ruben some questions. And we also encourage you all to ask questions. So we'll be keeping an eye on the questions that come in. This is being recorded, and we will send out a recording afterwards. So yeah, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we look forward to engaging with you. Without further ado, I will introduce our panelists, starting with Ruben to my right. Ruben, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and the American Glamping Association?
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Ruben Martinez. I'm the founder and executive director of the American Glamping Association. I started back in the glamping space about 18 years ago now, more on the technology side, and then jumped a bit more into a bit more of everything from manufacturing, consulting, development, and then we built the association along the way to help provide tools, resources, a community, and a network for anybody and everybody that's in the space. And so it's just exciting to be here, seeing the factory, seeing the finished product of, obviously this great units that not only have been created, but will be created here in the future. And so it's just always great to see what's new and exciting. So very happy to be here.
Thanks, Ruben. And I'm excited to hear more about those early days, the Wild West of glamping.
Sure.
Gene, tell us about yourself and Azure, and then we'll jump into how Azure got into the glamping space in a minute.
Sure. So my business partner Ross McGuire and I started the company a little bit over 4 years ago. We developed the process to 3D print units using recycled materials. So the unit you see in the back is actually X360. It consists of 2 units. And both of the shells printed in one day. We have 3 printers here. So and using 60% recycled plastic. So we use 300,000 empty water bottles to make what you see there in the back. The company is we really have a platform to make units for different verticals, from housing for the homeless, affordable housing, either single family or multifamily. We're helping rebuild LA. That's where the company was started after fires. And our second factory is in Denver, just opened last month. Really excited to be here. The state provided some subsidies for us to be able to open here. And I live in LA, but I come to Denver every month. So it's so great to see Ruben in person. I usually see him just once a year at the Glamping show. So now we're making it a little more often now. Yeah, so that's a little bit about us.
Thanks, Gene. And then yeah, back to you, Ruben. Can you just tell us a bit more about your early involvement in the glamping industry and how it got to the place where it is now?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question because looking at the unit behind us, the early days, definitely a lot more Wild West. If anybody's listening and newer to the space and feels like, it can be a little bit Wild West like, imagine, almost 20 years ago. As I always say, kind of back in the day, there was just a little bit more of it was about the land and maybe 1 or 2 units. And so it wasn't as sophisticated. It was definitely more build a plane while you're flying it, maybe a bit more hobby than business. And so over the years, just as the industry has matured, there's obviously more, larger projects, more substantial projects, substantial investment. within the space, everybody from, larger hotel groups or real estate groups that are now trying to figure out the best way to enter in the market and what it actually means to them. So I think early days and, 15 to 20 years ago, everybody was just trying to figure it out. And that's, honestly kind of how we started as the association, is that people were looking for, I need help with permitting. I need help with financing. I need help with, infrastructure. Do you know what console insurance? And so now that's obviously in a completely different place compared to traditional hospitality. It's still early days, but being able to see and, look at a unit like this just wasn't really an option early days. And now we talk about the needs of what operators, investors need now. It was just different than then. And so I think now there's more tools and resources. And honestly, I think one of the main differences is that there are those experts that have been able to have been there and done that and have walked the path and can help people avoid some of those mistakes as an operator, because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, development is hard. There's just not a cookie cutter approach to this industry as a whole, but development is just typically hard. So I would say, the early days had similar challenges to what we are now, but now there's more of a playbook for it. Just doesn't happen to be, as cookie cutter maybe as like the hotel industry.
Sure. And just a quick follow-up on that, as you mentioned, the industry has gotten a lot more institutionalized and kind of started off with more of these mom and pop, just a couple of units. Do you think there's still room and enough low-hanging fruit out there for the kind of smaller operators to jump in?
Definitely. I mean, from what we see on a yearly basis is that there still isn't enough units out there for the demand that exists. So that's still lopsided.
Yep.
At some point that'll probably even out, but that's not, now or in the immediate future. And so there's still more demand. And we see that through the booking trends of people looking for places to stay, and it's booked up. Yeah. There's a seasonality aspect of it to where, people don't always want to go glamping in Colorado in mid-February, but sometimes they do around, snowmobiling and snowshoeing and things like that. But yes, there's a seasonality aspect to what some of that looks like. But yes, there's still a lot of blank canvas for mom and pop shops. There's still a lot of development that is happening now and will continue to happen. And we haven't caught up to the demand that exists. And I think to the other side of that, though, there's just a lot more development now than there have been 15 years ago. So even though there's a lot of blank canvas and a lot of opportunity, operators, manufacturers, everybody is now seeing more competition than ever, which is a good thing. So people have to figure out how to differentiate themselves from an operator standpoint, from the manufacturer standpoint, to provide what experience users really want, versus early days 15 years ago, you could just put up a tent and put it on there and you didn't have to really do anything. People would book it and be fine. Now the demands are, oh, I saw this over there. I really like this, or I want to stay 4 days instead of 2 days. Yeah. How are you going to make my stay comfortable? I want food and beverage. I want experiences. And so it's just a different ask, but the demand hasn't leveled out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and you kind of teed it up with the manufacturing side and kind of how folks differentiate themselves. And Gene, can you, I know I've heard the story once or twice, but for the audience, can you just share how we got into the industry?
Yeah. So we started the company during COVID, and in our mind, the biggest demand was in ADUs and backyard studios, so people need some extra space in their house. And our first, one of the first customers, two guys came in and said, we want a unit like this with every upgrade. We don't have any electric, so we want it to be solar. We want to have a real nice shower in the bathroom. We want to have a nice kitchenette. We just want it to be luxury. And I said, what are you getting this for? This is going to be in your backyard. He said, no, we own a glamping resort in Big Sur. And what we love about your unit is you can deliver it where we've had difficulty delivering units to our site. It's a very steep climb. And we have a beautiful view, but we just, we have tents and we have tree houses, but we need some, just like we said, we want somebody who can stay a week. Oh, and they have a restaurant and the sushi bar and we want people to stay longer. And so they were the first customer. And I, quite honestly, never heard of glamping. This was 4 years ago. I had to put my phone under the conference table to Google what glamping means. And then I called my girlfriend and said, the guy's here from Three Bones. And she said, Three Bones, it's the most magical place. So anyway, since then, I've now stayed at 24 glamping. I've become a glamper. In all kind of locations. Some that you can book through Marriott and Hyatt and Hilton, and some that you just drive on the side of you see on the side of the road. And so when I stay in those places, I don't necessarily talk as much to operators. Sometimes I'm like incognito. I just want to talk to the users. And what I'm hearing is, people are like me. Like we're not campers. We like nice accommodations, but why not stay in a beautiful setting instead of going to downtown or stay in a chain hotel? And so we've evolved our offering. We first of all, our units are very well insulated, so they're very they're very warm in the winter and cool in the summer, which something you don't find. I remember staying in a glamping resort in Montana in June, and I had every piece of clothing on me because it was so cold. Without naming names, but it was just not planned. It wasn't supposed to be operating during that time of year, or it was just too cold. And so over time, we've evolved our offering. We now have 3 different unit types, from 180, which is a studio that come with a Murphy. You can get with a Murphy bed, to a 270. Those are all square feet. You can have a small 1-bedroom, or you can have 360, which is going to be a larger bedroom and 2-bedroom. So different styles. We have units that we do better where the snow, or units that go in the desert. And I just find, you refer to them as mom and pop. I refer to them as entrepreneurs. There's so much entrepreneurial spirit, and it's kind of hard to start a business. Like our business, we had to raise a lot of money, but to start a glamping resort, you really can find land. Sometimes people even don't buy the land; they lease the land. What's happening? So on one hand, you have a lot more hotel chains that are getting in this business, so that's interesting. But on the other hand, there are now lots of investors. So a tax bill that just passed last year gives investors an opportunity to do accelerated depreciation and write off the cost of the whole unit in the first year. So somebody can buy a $70,000 small studio, put 10% down, and put $7,000 investment, writes $70,000 off. So that's immediate return. But they're not operators; they're investors. They're usually high-income individuals. So they would love to put these units in glamping resorts and develop some kind of a rev share or lend lease. So because the requirement is they need to be for short-term rental. That's brand new. We had a slew of orders at the end of last year, like we didn't know what was going on. But now we have we have a group of investors that want to spend $50 million buying these units, and we need now to recommend them where to put this place. So what an incredible opportunity, especially for an entrepreneur who maybe doesn't have the money to get the units, but they have opportunity to have investor put the units. So really exciting time for the industry.
And you anticipated my next question, but just back to the product side, can you just talk a bit about how Azure's environmental and sustainability ethos kind of ties into the space?
And really, for the first 3 years, so that's all I talked about. This tax thing is brand new, but our units are highly sustainable. So we use mix of recycled polymers and fiberglass to make them. Tens of thousands of pounds of recycled plastic that is used to make these units. It takes 1 day to print and 3 to 4 weeks to finish. So somebody can order a unit today and move in next month. Unheard of for the industry. I'm already hearing that some of the larger manufacturers are totally booked for the rest of the year. So the timing for opening this Colorado facility was just actually very fortunate for this. Is because now there is increased demand and we have capacity to satisfy this demand. And a lot of people who stay in glamping resorts are very focused on sustainability. I mean, I love that. It's really is. It's not just being back in the nature, but also not ruining the nature. So staying in a unit that was made environmentally friendly. Again, you will see this. We have this large factory. We have no trash dumpster. There is every piece of material that's going to be used is going to be used purposely. We're not going to throw anything away. So several people who bought our units are using the fact that they're produced sustainably in their marketing materials. And it's a whole package. Different people look for different things, but the fact we kind of check a bunch of boxes. They're luxurious, they're well insulated, they're quick to install and to make and install, and they're sustainable. So lots of advantages.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing I've seen in my 6 months on the job is that every operator wants to be unique, and having a 3D printed unit is definitely a unique sell. But yeah, so we kind of got a bit of Azure's perspective on the tax incentive. Ruben, I'm just kind of curious to hear from a kind of broader industry perspective. How has that accelerated depreciation out of the 2025 big beautiful bill? How has that affected the industry more broadly?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept. And if you take a step back, I think the most important part is that as operators, investors, manufacturers start to take a look at how they want to get involved in this space, what's still true now is from the beginning of glamping time has been you usually need about 5 pieces of the puzzle to get an operation up and running, and rarely does anybody have even 4 pieces of the puzzle. Really have 2, maybe 3. And so it's really critical to be able to look at what type of unique partnerships, financing options, anything at all that can help you get that extra piece of the puzzle. And this is one where, sure, it may not work for every situation, but maybe at least points you in the right direction and also uncovers maybe there's also additional unique situations like this at the local level, at the state level. And so it really is part of the due diligence process of operator, investor, manufacturer to take a look at this and maybe it helps to peel back and uncover other opportunities that could exist, because the reality is that for most developers or operators, many are coming into the space and they haven't done something like this before. Maybe they've been in hospitality, maybe they've been in development, maybe, but rarely have they had a successful track record in developing glamping locations. And so doing that, research on the front end to make sure that you're uncovering opportunities that help add another piece of the puzzle is just good business. Like, you just have to be able to look at it. And again, it works for some, maybe not for all. But
and what are those 5 pieces?
Well, the 2
I can guess them, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, the 2 that I'll tell you people are always struggle with, one is always going to be capital, right? And the second is the right piece of land, because it's easy to think of, oh, this is the type of property that I have in my mind. It's going to look like this. It's going to be this location. And they go into the process thinking that they're going to be able to find that, slam dunk, no problem. It's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And then once you find that piece of land, maybe you don't have the permissions or permitting, and the local county won't allow you to actually do what you want to do there. Or the infrastructure that it's going to take to actually get it up and running is going to be 10 times more than you thought it would, because it's in a pretty remote location.
Yeah.
So what the land, the piece of the puzzle, it's all encompassing land, I'll put permitting in there for that as well. And financing is just still, even with more options and even with more opportunity, and this is why something like this, where you can tap into opportunities that allow you to have that advanced depreciation, is worth looking at, because it's just harder than people think it's going to be. And that's true about all development and construction. It just takes longer and it's a bit more expensive. And so getting everything buttoned up and making sure that you're at least limiting the surprises that you're going to have, because there's always going to be a surprise, is an important part of that research part. But 2 pieces of the puzzle that continue to be struggles are those.
Yeah. And I imagine if we had this incentive without everything you alluded to in your first answer of the infrastructure, the partners, the playbooks, probably no one would be taking advantage of the incentive because it's too intimidating. So.
Totally. And I think sometimes it's not a bad thing to jump into projects with a little bit of like a naive perspective, because as you talk about the mom and pops and being an entrepreneur, I think most people would agree that some, entrepreneurs can sometimes have a little screw loose. You have to be able to.
Not Gene.
You have to be able to look at these projects and not be deterred. You have to be able to look at something that's a blank canvas and say, yeah, I can do this. And 9.9 times out of 10, when you have that attitude, you can do it.
Yeah.
But for many people, when they look at the complexities and levels of developing a glamping project, for a lot of people, it's like, no, that seems really hard and difficult and complex. And for the entrepreneurial mindset, you're like, this is challenging and exciting, and it's a problem, and I want to solve it. And so,
yeah.
I think just on the tax incentive side, on the partnership side, I think it's just important I think we're seeing a lot less lone wolves going into these projects because they realize that you need a village to do it. And sometimes you also just need to you do need to bring in people who are also expertise in something like this. Like, you don't have to be an expert in it, but you have to be smart enough to say, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Let me find somebody who's smarter, who can help educate me on whether this is going to be a viable path.
A small dose of humility helps.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Gene, anything else you want to touch on the tax incentive side that you didn't already talk about?
I really think that, so while, since I kind of heard about this, a few months ago, I talked to a lot of people ask me and I ask others. And first of all, 90% of the people never heard of this. I mean, they heard about Big Beautiful Bill, but they never dug into the details. And the requirement here is, you can buy a unit that's on wheels. It has to be used for short-term rental, so it can be used as an ADU. You have to keep it for 5 years. So again, it's not something you can use for 1 year and then next year you sell it. When you do sell it, you will need to have recapture, depreciation. So there are lots of technical things, but there is a number of people who now studied this now. This bill was signed, I think July 4th or 5th last year. Now it's been in effect for a year, so a lot more people know about this too. So now it's really upon us, upon others to match. Matching the investor interest with operators' interest. And so, even people who are watching this podcast, if you own a piece of land and have the infrastructure and can ready, want to get started with some units and don't have the capital for it, contact us. We will connect you with somebody who does. Or even you have a resort and just don't have enough. I mean, Ruben said, so many locations. I found it firsthand. It's like the unit that we have in Big Sur that, it's impossible. It's booked 9 months in advance. So it's like, I can't plan 9 months in advance. So if somebody wants more inventory and they have a location, you really can have these units in the next couple of months and can be in business. Then there are a lot of locations that could be glamping during one season and workforce housing during another season. So we have we're talking here, I'm getting calls and texts. Somebody wants to buy 10 units for Arizona, and it's like, it's a perfect glamping location, but there is also like mining operation opening nearby. What a great way to kind of have some security, right? Yeah, you can run as a glamping location, but if you have some vacancies or when it's hot in Arizona, you might not have the season for it, but you have workers who are coming to the area and they will need these units. Yep. So we have a client in Joshua Tree, 29 Palms. It's the largest marine base. Again, their season is 6 months, but for the other 6 months, they're bringing Marines to train there, actually in the hot weather, to be prepared for going into areas that are very hot. So again, entrepreneurs in the room, what a great opportunity now to get start thinking, what can we do?
Yeah. That leads nicely to my next question, and I'll give this up to either of you. To what extent, obviously entrepreneurship is a matter of risk taking, and starting a new glamping resort or expanding one is a hugely or can be a hugely risky endeavor. So to what extent do modular units and tiny homes on wheels kind of change that risk calculation and allow operators to take smaller bets and test out new products and new locations and stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think, you know, in the early days in glamping, there was a big push for us in particular, for us to standardize like what is glamping and what isn't. We chose, I think rightfully, not to really get involved with that because of the entrepreneurial spirit of especially the American market. We knew like we don't really know what this is going to be 2, 5, 50 years down the road. And if we define it now, it might limit its growth and what it could be down the road. So I'm glad we didn't do that because I think back in the day it would have just been very
Wrong.
it would have been limited, right? And so as we fast forward to today, I think what the market has told us and what as more properties are getting up and running and as people are learning lessons after certain seasons, what we've told and what we typically advise is like, is there a way to, I won't call it a soft lunch, but you phase things out, right? You test the market to see, because you have assumptions on what your guests are really going to want or what the market can give you. But before you invest $2 million in units, plop 1 or 2 down and see what the market tells you, right? And then you can learn some lessons. But what the market has definitely told us is that seasonality is a really big factor within, even on the planning side of people's pro formas and investment that they want to receive, because really, if you can be up 10 years out of a month instead of 6 years out of a month, that's a big deal, right? And so what module units, hard-sided units, more, permanent style, non-canvas style units have done with the market in certain areas has allowed for the season to be extended, has allowed for certain projects to make sense, right? Because during the pro forma process and as people are trying to find funding, all of a sudden, if you're the difference between kind of moving forward just your knob a little bit is that can you be open 1 month longer? Right now, the financials actually start to make sense. The revenue starts to make sense. Your season really can be extended. You can tap into a different market. That's like, I like that area, but listen, I've never gone glamping before. I've never gone camping before. I'm used to staying in hotels, but I'll stay in that, right? And we've always said that these types of units have allowed for people to be a bit more of a bridge to the outdoors, right? There is a big percentage of people who just never really experienced the outdoors, and it can be scary for them. They think of the gear and the location, and I don't have this or I don't have that. And so I think there's been some obviously big positives to what these units do, but I think the perception of access to the outdoors and then also seasonality specifically have been, I think helpful.
And what I see on our end is it takes so long to get the financing so that, the entrepreneurs work on this financing. Finally, it comes through and you call the manufacturer and it's, they'll be delivered in 9 months. And that's like, now you have to carry interest on this because you don't want to delay closing, right? So the fact that you can get them fast, and even the fact that they come on wheels, trying out, as Ruben said, trying out different units and just trying out, usually the sites are pretty large. So let's put some, 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms or studios. And then if we see that more families are coming where they need a 2-bedroom, could we move some things around? Could we, people even ask, can we add to the unit? That's very hard to do, but moving the units or somebody buying some 2 bedrooms and then later on saying, can I exchange some of these? That's not a possibility. Definitely, once if you put the unit on foundation, which we also of course do, that makes it very hard to move. So that's just the flexibility of it and speed.
Yep.
I've developed many projects, and usually even construction of a larger project is the biggest risk is what the environment is going to be when you're finished, right? You can secure it now, now is one certain interest rate, when you finish it's a different interest rate. So now the interest rates are high, but you can finance these. A lot of times there is very little or no prepayment penalty. Do it now, interest rates come down, you refinance. And by that time, you have there is some financing that gives a benefit to somebody who has some track record. So yeah, you might take some units from investors and stuff like this, you don't have track record. But be in business for a couple seasons, and now you have a track record. Now you say, I want to buy this units. Now I can get longer terms financing that's fixed rate, and it's not as risky.
Yep. Well, great. Let's talk about financing. So I know this is not the same as financing, like, conventional housing development. So maybe starting with you, Ruben, can you just kind of talk through who are the financing partners that operate in this space, and what should a new operator know about that side of the.
Sure, there's a lot to consider it's a big question. But I think from the front end of the process, people do get held up a little bit because maybe they've gone to their local bank and the local bank has said, I don't know what you're talking about. We've never done a project like this. We're not interested, right? Even though we like you, it's just not going to work. Now there's really 3 or 4 partners that not only invest in this space, but even specialize in it. And so, we always, especially for our members, give a kind of those intros first and to start there. Nothing's guaranteed, but the nice part about where we're at with financing in the industry is that you can skip the whole front end of the process of, wait, what's glamping? What's outdoor hospitality? What is this structure? What does that mean? You can skip that. And now you can go straight to just being judged on the validity of your project, right? So you can't skip that part of the process. There's unique, inventory financing, parts of financing that exists now. I think the biggest misconception that still exists today is that I think a lot of people think that this is because it's their first project, and they think that they're going to be able to find an easy big pool of investors that are going to invest in their first time project. That's just not the case.
Yep.
There are investors, that work with manufacturers and work with other groups that, you can really tap into, but, just to call it out, because that is a misconception. You're saying, I've never done this before. I'm going to go out there and find investors. This is going to be my project 1 of 10. That doesn't work in any industry.
Get in early.
Yeah, exactly. And so we kind of try and do a reality check on that. But between SBA loans, USDA loans that exist, there are partners out there that will take a look, and especially, they're not even super small projects, but if you have done your research, if you've got, a bit of your own skin in the game, you need your skin in the game. You have to have that for the banks to take you seriously. A team, you become now somebody that people will say, yeah, I'll finance your project. Completely different than 10 or 15 years ago, where nobody really wanted to touch the space. So the debt financing for sure is more advanced, and there are more options that are out there, but also, manufacturers and other projects, there's other unique strategic partnerships that can exist. There isn't just a cookie cutter approach of, here's the 2 ways that you get your project up and running, especially for project number 1.
Yep.
There's all sorts of unique ways to do it, but, I would say the diligence and the work to have a plan up front that has been tested and validated is really important.
Yep.
Because again, at the end of the day, especially for debt financing, their margins are smaller and they can't miss, right? And as an industry, we don't want you to miss, but also because for every win that's out there as a project, then that debt source or any of those investors as a whole get a bigger appetite for it.
Yep. And then, it's kind of to tie back in what we were saying before, it's a matter of starting somewhat small and
even the reality is that there isn't just one financing source typically that is all inclusive for your project, right? You might have somebody that comes in, friends and family that help you with the land, or an angel investor that helps you with the land, a bank that comes and helps you with the structures, a third source that helps you with the rest of your operational capital. That's not uncommon, and we try and encourage and make sure people aren't deterred after, it's just like any entrepreneur that's out there that's gotten to raise money, you're going to receive 1,000 no's before you get one yes, right? And so just because you've gone to 3 or 4 debt sources doesn't mean you stop there. You take a step back, you have more conversations, you see, who people can put you in contact with. And often it happens to be hey, no, but have you talked to so-and-so? They're interested in a project like this.
Sure.
So I think eventually I always joke that my goal one day is, you go to Glamping University and then go to the Glamping Bank, and everything's in one spot, and you get your glamping training certificate, and everything's there. But the reality is that you just have to, on the financing side, just like with many other industries, you really got to scrap it
You have to be
together.
scrappy.
You just have to be, and that's just part of the journey at the moment. But the money's there, the appetite is there, and investors and debt sources are there.
Okay. Gene, what do you have to add there?
Yeah, really very much what Ruben added, but just to give an example, and because we work with one operator who bought 10 units from us, and he has track record, but never done anything big like this, and so he went ahead and got lease financing that it's pretty expensive, Now, if this units can be financed by an investor with a perfect credit who doesn't borrow, for 30 units, just buys one unit. Now you can get much more favorable terms. So even, I might not own this unit, it's provided by investor, but my payment to the owner, including rev share or some kind of a guaranteed payment, is still gonna be lower than if I were to own. So it really is exactly what Ruben said. It's scrappy. A good place to find a lot of these people. I'm gonna give a plug to your show, Glamping Show USA. Literally, after that first unit was sold, I looked at where can I learn more, and I came to Aurora, and there was a show, and in 2 days, like first day totally educational, second day you can go outside, take a look at the units, but literally in 2 days you can meet those 3 or 4 lenders. Lenders will tell you need a feasibility study. You can have 2 or 3 people who do feasibility studies, and there's so many people. I've been really just blown away by the entrepreneurial spirit, because some of the people who are on the panels, the kind of projects they've done, like in the middle of nowhere in Utah, or on the Pacific Ocean. I mean, you just, I've started several businesses, and I'm just sitting there saying, how in the world did they pull this off? But it's not just we want to do it. It's like they show pictures. It's actually happening. So I find that's what I love about working with this industry, is you have entrepreneurs that come with very different skill set to this. And it's like either marketing or hospitality or real estate development. It's like what Ruben said, or all of the above, or some of the above.
Yep.
In how people have done so, and you see some beautiful projects,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere that can be comfortable. In my mind, that's a way to vacation now.
One thing, kind of touching on the collaborative nature. Well, first I'll just pause. I've got an eye on the messages. Feel free to send in any questions. We'll get to them in the last 20 minutes of this. But yeah, just to kind of touch on the collaborative nature of the industry. One thing that I've learned about as I'm relatively new to the industry in this role is land leases and revenue sharing agreements. And it sounds like that is actually what unlocks a lot of projects and allows them to go quickly. So can you just kind of, I'll start with you, Ruben, like how does that structure work? And
yeah, it kind of goes back to the pieces of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, to get a project up and running, there's always going to be compromise. I think the reality is that people go in a project and say, here's exactly what's going to be. It's going to be 20 units. I've got all from investors or debt source, and here's, where it is, and here's what it looks like. You start to roll out the plan, you start to, visit properties, you start to look at units, you start to look at costs, and you compromise. Like at the end of the day, you're like, someone has to give because here's the reality. And
Yep.
so over the years, there have been, projects that have done a good job and a poor job of figuring out a way to be more strategic with their partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a cookie cutter approach to, all right, if I want to free up my capital instead of acquiring the land, I want to put that towards the operational aspect of the property. So I'll enter into a unique land lease or an agreement with like an earn-out agreement with the property owner. It's really, who's taking on risk and responsibility, and then you come to an agreement. I think now more than ever, there's unique agreements and partnerships that exist from even, manufacturers, where some manufacturers are financing internally, or other property are saying, we can be actually your boots on the ground property manager, but to free up some capital, we'll do a revenue share with you on that, but we're not going to acquire the land and be part of that. And so it is very unique in how people are approaching it. There isn't a standard approach to it, but I think it's encouraging because instead of saying, all right, we don't have all pieces of the puzzle, we're just going to stop. Everybody loses in that situation. And so the ability for people to say, all right, let's get creative. What can we do to actually at least get it up and running? And then afterwards, maybe we, buy out the partners, or for property number 2, we now have our track record and actuals and historical numbers that we can maybe get better financing terms or larger financing terms. And so I think it's interesting and not mandatory for people to do that. If you can, bootstrap and get everything up and running on your own, absolutely do it, but not everybody's in that situation. So you just have to be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Gene, anything to add?
Yeah, so after visiting first Glamping Show USA, the second one we exhibited, and it's like the last day, the last hour, you have this operator running around, oh, I'll take this unit if you do rev share. And that's, I respect entrepreneurs, but that's not a very strategic way to get the best deal, right? And I really think that getting rev share from the manufacturer is going to be very expensive because our capital is very expensive. We raise money and both equity and so I really think it's being a little bit more strategic. Really, and Ruben and I talked about this just before this started. While there is no formulas now, I think the industry is going to mature. I've seen this in other industries. I was in education and in real estate development, and it always kind of new idea always starts kind of a bootstrap or just some ideas. But as time evolves, when I was building charter schools, there was fund financing that it started out with just one person trying it. And then as time went on, it's like everybody did it because there was a formula. So I think that as industry matures, there is going to be more of a formulaic approach to this. And people can plan more. And the investors who are jumping in, I think, could contribute a lot more to growth of this industry. You see resorts at large national parks. There's so many state parks, and especially like in California, some beautiful spaces, and there's nothing around them, right? So all the national parks now have a lot of glamping resorts. There are state parks, there are lakes, there is so many opportunities. And I don't know what's going on, but hotels have become so expensive. So on one hand, people saying maybe travel is down. Yeah, kind of gas prices would mean that the travel is down, but it's like every time I stay in a hotel, even the economy hotel, now prices are just out of sight. So I really think economics for glamping resorts and dual spices, and within like 60, 90 miles of large metropolitan area, just makes so much sense.
Yeah, the state park is one that is a proven model now. And so I'm glad you brought that up because there's been a few companies like Timberline's a good example. They went in and negotiated agreements with state level and local parks. Not at the federal level, but as state parks, and saying you have these underperforming campgrounds that nobody's visiting. We'll take it over. We'll give you X percentage of the revenue. We'll plop in tents. We'll manage it. It's defunct right now, so we'll clean it up. It's already there. It's a location. It's on a lake. It's wherever, and that's actually proven. It's hard to negotiate. It takes time to negotiate, but there's been some success at that state level for those campgrounds. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually been a proven model. It's hard. Yeah. Everybody thinks it'll be easy, but there are some that did it even for the whole state, or I'll just take those 2 parks, that they're underperforming. They're not taking on any revenue. You'll make more money. We're taking on the risk. And, so that's actually good.
Yeah, that's cool. Makes a lot of sense. And I imagine then that unlocks the revenue they need to be able to maintain and draw more people in.
Right.
Do
the
what they
win-win.
do best. Yeah.
Yeah, at least for now.
Sure.
And in those instances, rev share would make a lot more sense because infrastructure is already there. So you need to make investment in bring pull the water lines or build the septic. So the infrastructure is there. So you can really have a light on capital.
Those tend to be a bit more, basic. You're not trying to build a 5-star resort. It's more like campground style, but it's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, Gene started to touch on the future of the industry and its evolution. We got the 18 years ago to present perspective. Ruben, can you bust out your crystal ball, and what are you seeing right now in 2026 that you think will be more common than other 18 years from now?
You know, I hinted on it earlier, and I think the focus of at least the next iteration, you know, I kind of have said historically that we go through these 3-year cycles as an industry, but looking at kind of the next 2 or 3 of those cycles, you know, so 6, 9, even kind of 12 years out, the focus and or the challenge, I think, for those that are either newer or existing in the space and trying to develop is how do you really, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, there's just more options now than there ever were. We're still not at a capacity or a ceiling or anything, but there's just more options, right? You look in any state, you look at the type of outdoor hospitality glamping that you're trying to book, you now have options, which is great. So I think the challenge is going to be for those that are really trying to grow and maintain their operation is how do you really set yourself apart? And differentiating yourself is hard, right? But you know, back in the day, you could really just put up the tent. You didn't have to offer much more than that, and people loved it. It was unique and it was different. So now, you know, I think looking in the crystal ball, those that will be successful can really crack that code of additional revenue through experiences, right? Partnerships with local restaurants and shops that create an experience where either now you don't have to build up a whole food infrastructure, maybe the infrastructure comes to you, or you have a way that because of your location, you can really partner with the restaurants and shops and in town, so you have some type of experience. And how can you keep people on your property longer? You know, I think it's easy to get somebody to go glamping one time. It's a lot harder to get them to come back, and especially multiple times in a year. And the difference between, you know, having somebody come for 2 days and 4 days is huge, right? That Monday, Tuesdays are always really hard for any glamping operator, for any hotel. But Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesdays are, you know, a nut to be cracked. And you do that through, you know, experiences. You do that through differentiation, food, restaurants, corporate events, weddings, and all that is easy to say, a lot harder to actually do well. And so I think if I was to say anything in the crystal ball, it's going to be able to, who can really crack that in a way that sets themselves apart and then can consistently create some type of iteration so that it doesn't go stale. Because that's the thing, you differentiate yourself. That doesn't mean you're good for the next 20 years. You got to
somebody will copy it, and
you got to continue to manipulate that and change it up and versus, you know, what was happening a while ago where you could just really put it up, not really think twice about it. Now it's really front, and you have to do that through the planning process because it's a lot harder. You can just flip a switch and do that. Like, all right, now this year, it's like, well, shoot, we don't have the on-site infrastructure to actually do the things that we think that will actually set ourselves apart. So you have to plan to differentiate.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, if you want to have weddings on site, how do you cater the wedding, or how do you?
Yeah, just flip a switch and do that. You know, so you have to. How do you then think 10 years ahead, and or at least set yourself up? You know, Dawn has a property in New York, and she did a really good job of thinking ahead, where she bought a property that actually had some infrastructure for a restaurant and brewery, and for the first several years didn't do anything with it. Now I think she's planning on, you know, adding that in, but she had the permitting on the front. She had additional permitting for 40 units. You know, and so it wasn't that she needed to have that up and running right away, but as a option.
Sure. Yeah. Gene,
well, just to add to what Ruben says, and that's what I love about this industry is people come up with some great ideas. You know, so I'm working with somebody and they want to create an environment where people can, there's going to be a lockbox where you can put your phone in the lockbox and be disconnected from the rest of the world. You know, so what that person suggested is, look, it's great that you have internet in all units. Can you turn it off? Right. So that's one idea. The other idea is, again, around seasonality, is to open this resorts to local folks. You know, run it as where people can use the amenities. Because when it's 120 degrees in the desert, you might not have people from LA drive up there, but there are people who live around there and they'd like to have a nice pool. And it'll just create a different vibe, you know, when you have people in the area. My crystal ball is I also think that there's going to be many more international opportunities. Again, just as we were sitting here, so I said, I never stayed in glamping. I now remember, it ages me a little bit. 30 years ago, I stayed in Africa in a, an incredible, that was glamping, right? And so it's maybe that's kind of where it started, right? So having this incredible places. But there is another group that I'm going to give a plug to. It's called Eco Resort International. I've attended a couple of their sessions last year in Greece and 2 years ago in Africa. And I mean, again, it's entrepreneurship that we're seeing here in the U.S. to the next level. You have people who are, there's a group from the Netherlands. They put up some glamping units right in the middle of Amsterdam, and now they have locations in Africa and Asia and planning in Central America. So, and we're getting so many inquiries from Caribbean. There's some beautiful spots. So we're trying to be more creative. How can we put their units in containers and ship them? So I really think that kind of what started maybe with the safari resorts and now kind of taken to the next level. But when you go overseas, you really rarely find a glamping resort. So I think that, look, American entrepreneurs have always been great at developing an idea that works here and then taking it globally, right? So I see some of that happening. And back to what Ruben says, really having something unique and then branding it. Once you have a brand and you can make it national and then taking it global, now you get people to look for you. It's like we don't spend a lot of money on marketing, but people look for Azure because they hear something, they see the idea, they see us on social media, and now they look for us even for a use that we haven't been advertising for, right? Because they have an idea of what they want to use. So I think that along the line of what Ruben's saying, it's not just developing differentiation, but taking it to more of a scale and then thinking national, regional, national, global, and running with it.
Yeah. And then just to kind of bring it specifically to Azure, how do you see us kind of contributing to that evolution? And I don't know how much you can talk about the project underway at Joshua Tree, but
no, we have a customer in Joshua Tree, and they have all the pieces together. They have a glamping consultant, they have a real estate development, and it's taken them 18 months to get a permit. But once it happens, it's gonna be an incredible development. 30 units. Our goal all along was to have a factory in every time zone. So of course we started in California. This is our second facility. I think that we're going to be looking towards the next 18, 24 months to open in Midwest and East Coast and internationally. We signed a joint venture in Dubai before this war broke out, but hopefully it'll be over soon. And there's a lot of demand for glamping resorts in the desert. They call them caravans and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of initial demand was from the glamping industry there. So yeah, it's the most exciting part to be in. I think in our industry for modular construction, and we can do it 70% faster, 30% less expensive, no waste, using recycled materials, and do it at scale. It took us 4 months to set up this factory, and another month or two we're manufacturing 5 to 10 units a week from here. So things are on one respect, things are getting easier, and in another respect, they're just as hard as they used to be, because you also have to look at competitors, and you cannot go on glamping trips for too much. So 2 days is perfect for me to disconnect and then be right back at this to plan and how do we grow this business and make it sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer my own question, one thing I'll add that I've seen from my conversations here in Colorado is that those same destinations where there's demand for the glamping, the outdoor hospitality projects, that is also where workforce is scarce. So I think and I think this is the case in Joshua Tree, we're to the extent that we're able to actually bring those two products and project types together.
So workforce housing together with
exactly. Yeah.
So people have a place to stay.
Yeah. There's a reason that those places are hard to get to and they're hard to live full time. So if we can make that easier for folks, then everybody wins. So we're getting close to the end of the time here. I want to bring it back up to you, just kind of closing thoughts, whether that's on, uh, you know, broader industry trends, what's right in front of us. How do you want to wrap up, Ruben?
No, no, just, thanks for the invite. And I think it's just really exciting to see, obviously what you guys are creating and what's on the horizon. And that just plays into the fabric of the industry as a whole, because, we've seen a lot and we've experienced a lot, and there's been, just like with any growing industry, peaks and valleys and interesting concepts and things that didn't last and things that are still lasting. And so I think what's really exciting is just to see, for this industry to really continue its growth, there has to be innovation. There just has been and will continue to be. And glamping has always rewarded the unique. Like, that's just kind of a fact that I like to lean on. Like, it's just the reality of it. It just rewards the different and unique. And so we've seen more and more unique concepts and unique executions, and the ability for things to be faster, and things to be higher quality, and things to be, to Gene, to your point, the piece of the puzzle too is timing too, because a lot of times for that development schedule, all of a sudden permitting takes a break, or it takes a little bit longer, or financing takes longer. Now you're missing that season, and then life happens, you miss another season for development because it snows in, and all sorts of different, it's a tough build out. And so just being able to have creative solutions to at least the problems that we know help the industry as a whole. So it's just always exciting to see what's new and exciting. So thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Ruben. Gene,
I just want to, I talked about I really enjoy meeting entrepreneurs in the industry, but I also want to say that how incredible this industry in terms of collaboration. So I go to this incognito, this resort, and when you run into an operator, they want to tell you everything about it. They want to tell you the whole history. And it's like, I've never seen, I've been in, I guess this is my fourth startup, and all in different industries. I've never seen this level of collaboration. It's literally like sitting in a campground and, around the fire and telling the stories. And the glamping entrepreneurs love to tell their stories. And they'll tell you things that work, and amazingly, they tell you things that don't work. I mean, it just, usually, like, especially when you talk to real estate developers, you only hear, just great stories. But here, you hear all of it. And you hear, and some of us you just put in the back of your head and just say, I need to remember this. Be it from recruiting employees, marketing programs that don't go well. People, some lender stories where things don't go well with some industry players, and still convince them that this is, don't take that one example as what this industry is all about. So it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be in this field. And then as a benefit to staying in these beautiful places, it's a huge plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just wrap up by saying, and answering the question we just got. Yes, we're happy to have folks come visit our factories, either here in Denver or in Los Angeles. We also highly recommend you come out and see some of these units that actually have been installed in some of these beautiful areas. So you're welcome to reach out to us. We can either arrange those tours or point you in the right direction for the
or people who are going to be coming for Glamping Show USA
absolutely
in Aurora. They could come a day before or day after and visit a factory.
Yep. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We're gonna wrap here, but look forward to staying in touch with you all, and we'll see you at the Glamping Show before long. Thanks, everyone.